On a winter night in 39 AD, Rome held its breath. The cold wasn't what made people shiver. It was the fear that tonight, a young girl from some respected household would vanish behind palace walls. Picture being only 14, already wearing your night clothes, thinking nothing outside your window could harm you. Then you hear metal boots striking stone, getting closer, echoing down your street like approaching thunder. You grew up being told that a call from the emperor was an honor. No one ever warned you that honor could arrive without knocking. No one warned you that soldiers could walk straight into your home as though it belonged to them. And no one warned you why they carried a lantern wrapped in red cloth, the same lantern they placed at your front door, marking your fate before you even understood it. In moments, your mother whispers your name like a prayer she hopes the gods won't hear. Your father tries to smile, but the smile collapses almost instantly. And then you learn the truth noble families whisper only when no one else can hear. The Palatine does not request daughters, it claims them. And if you think Flavia's nightmare begins here, you're mistaken. What waits for her inside the palace will make this moment seem almost gentle. This isn't legend. This was the night the Garden of Venus opened an event. So horrifying Rome tried to bury every trace of it. If the hidden darkness of history pulls you in, subscribe to Grim History, hit like, and once something in this tale unsettles you, tell me where in the world you're watching from. Flavia is the first girl we follow. Remember her name, because everything she will face was shaped by the life of the man who now controls her fate. To understand how someone can rot from the inside and grow into a creature capable of devouring an empire, you must step backward into the bloodline that produced him and the shadows that twisted him. Long before Rome learned to fear him, Caligula wasn't born a monster. He arrived in this world surrounded by glory. He was the son of Germanicus, Rome's shining general whose presence could calm legions and electrify crowds. The child should have grown into honor, bravery, and steadiness. But something else seeped into him, something slow and poisonous. His childhood didn't unfold among tutors or quiet gardens. It unfolded along the empire's rough borders, in military camps that smelled of sweat, iron, smoke, and blood. He learned to walk between lines of hardened soldiers, the soil trembling under their heavy boots. They adored seeing their commander's son dressed in tiny armor. They called him Caligula, Little Boot, a nickname spoken with affection, a name that would one day cling to horrors none of them could imagine. But even then, something inside the boy bent. Life on the frontier taught him his first brutal lesson. Power isn't handed down, it's seized. And once you take it, you never apologize for the way you use it. That was the first crack in him. More were coming. The shattering began with the suspicious death of Germanicus. Overnight, the beloved child became a threat. He watched helplessly as his mother and brothers were hunted, banished, or executed one by one, not by foreign enemies, but by Emperor Tiberius's cold, deliberate will. And then came Capri, the island the world imagined as Tiberius's peaceful retreat, but which hid something rotten behind its luxurious walls. What Caligula learned on Capri would shape the terror Flavia will one day face. Caligula, still barely more than a child, was forced to live beside the man who had destroyed his family. Capri was not a peaceful island. It was a decorated prison filled with fear, whispers, and the constant sense that death could fall from any direction. For 6 long years, he lived under the watch of an emperor who trusted no one and killed without warning. Here, Caligula learned a second rule, darker than the first. If you want to survive, you must smile at the man you secretly want to crush. He hid every tear, buried every spark of anger, and bowed to the very person who had turned his life into ruins. And while he showed obedience on the outside, something in his mind was splitting. The fracture widened and widened until a cold, silent rage began to seep through. So when Tiberius finally died in 37 AD, and the Senate lifted Caligula now, 24 onto the throne, Rome exploded with joy. People cheered in the streets. Citizens threw flowers. Senators praised him with relief so deep it shook. A new beginning, they said. A bright prince, the son of Germanicus, had come to clean away the rot. And for a short moment, it seemed true. Caligula freed prisoners, burned the documents that Tiberius's spies had gathered, ended hated taxes, and poured money into celebrations and public happiness. Rome believed it had been rescued, but the man who would one day reach for Flavia had not awakened yet. His darkness was only stretching its wings. Soon after, everything changed. Near the end of that first hopeful year, an illness struck him so violently that he hovered close to death. And when he finally rose from that bed, something important inside him had not risen with him. The boy who once learned to hide his hatred on Capri no longer felt the need to hide anything at all. Standing high above the city on the Palatine Hill, looking down at the people who worshipped him, Caligula discovered a terrifying idea. When you rise to absolute power, there are no gods left above you, only victims below. The cheers of the crowd, the trembling silence of the Senate, none of it humbled him. His sanity peeled away like old skin, and what remained was the creature Capri had carved. Kindness twisted into madness, fairness spoiled into cruelty, and deep inside the shadows of his mind, an idea began to harden. Women of noble families were not daughters, not members of society, not human beings. They were tools, and the first tool he would test was waiting somewhere across Rome, living a life she didn't yet know would be ripped apart. This darkness didn't fall on Rome like a storm. It slid in quietly like sickness, slow, soft, easy to ignore until it reached the doors of people who believed they were safe. And across the city that same night, Flavia's family heard the knock that no one wished for, the knock no one could refuse. It began with a visit. The emperor's messengers carried no swords. They carried scrolls sealed in imperial purple, the color that meant life or death, depending on how you answered. Inside these scrolls was a command no parent dared challenge. Send your daughter. Not just any daughter. The most beautiful, the most pure, the one whose presence would benefit the emperor's pleasure and politics. Families called it an honor, but they knew it was a death sentence covered in perfume. To deny the emperor was treason. To obey him was to give your child to a monster. The girls were taken to a private wing of the palace, a place Caligula himself named with mocking sweetness the Garden of Venus. When Flavia crossed the entrance, She believed she might still hold some control over her life. She didn't know that this illusion would disappear before the sun returned. At first glance, the place looked like paradise. Pink marble walls, beds dressed in silk, perfume drifting through the air, and servants who moved quietly, attending to every need. The girls who arrived believed they had been chosen for some sacred duty. But slowly, painfully, the truth surfaced. The beauty was only the mask. The prison was everything underneath it. And the real purpose of this place, the horror hiding behind its lovely surface, was still waiting for its moment to strike. And the worst truth? This was only the beginning. Flavia soon learned the Garden of Venus didn't crush girls fast. It broke them slowly, step by step, until they understood every part of their own undoing. The jewels they were forced to wear weren't decorations. They felt like chains, cold, heavy, reminding them they now belonged to the state. The thin silks were even worse. They weren't meant to protect or cover, only to expose and shame. Even their names were taken away. Real names meant identity, so Caligula replaced them with numbers or cruel nicknames he whispered for his own entertainment. But the worst weapon wasn't gold, silk, or fear. It was waiting. Waiting for a summons that could come any night. Every echo of boots in the hallway made their hearts jump. Every quiet felt like another piece of their mind sliding away. By the time Caligula ever touched them, the damage was already done. They were frightened, softened prey. And when the summons finally arrived, they weren't taken to a private room. They were led into Caligula's banquet hall, his nightly stage. The girls were displayed before Rome's powerful men like exotic animals. Caligula walked among them with cold amusement, commenting on their bodies while fathers, uncles, and future husbands sat nearby in forced silence. Any sign of discomfort could mean death. That silence cut deeper than any blade. The final act was a ritual, not chaos. Soft music hid their cries. Selected men watched. Every move the girl made followed rules she didn't choose. Caligula wasn't seeking pleasure. He was asserting ownership. And under the torchlight, Flavia realized something terrifying. He didn't see her as a person. He saw her as a place to practice cruelty. Flavia, daughter of a respected consul, entered the Garden of Venus still holding a small hope that she might serve in ceremonies or walk beside the emperor. For the first days, Caligula treated her kindly. He sent gifts, spoke to her gently, and acted as if he cared. It was all a trap. His attention softened her, lowered her guard, and made her believe she could survive him. When the mask finally fell, the shock was so sharp it felt like the air had been torn from her lungs. She learned the rule that ruled the palace. You cannot resist a man who believes he is a god. Caligula broke minds with skill. One night he was brutal. The next he cried in a girl's lap and offered jewels worth kingdoms. The sudden switch confused them so deeply that fear and comfort blended together. The one who hurt them became the only one who could soothe them. Escape became impossible, even in thought. Then he destroyed unity. Flavia tried to disappear among the other girls, but the emperor made invisibility dangerous too. He ranked them who pleased him, who failed him, who deserved reward or humiliation. Soon they turned against each other, fighting for scraps of safety. Friendship died, and once unity was gone, Caligula owned them completely when he grew bored of a girl. He didn't release her. He sold her to senators and generals in secret rooms. The same men who ruled Rome by day became part of his darkness at night. He dragged them into the filth so they would remain silent forever. Shared shame became another chain. Families were also forced to pretend gratitude. Some fathers had to host banquets after their daughters were harmed, lifting cups with shaking hands, praising the honor while their souls collapsed. Inside the palace, gratitude was another word for surrender. Surveillance inside the palace tightened like a trap. No corner felt safe. Guards, slaves, and spies watched everything. Even a muffled cry could be reported as rebellion. Day by day, the Garden of Venus stripped away the girl's humanity until only fear remained. By 40 and 41 AD, the palace felt poisoned. The girls who once arrived with bright eyes now moved like ghosts. Many stopped speaking. Some stopped reacting at all. Their minds pulled back into themselves, hiding in the only place Caligula couldn't reach. Then the suicides began. Once one girl broke, others followed. Flavia was trapped in the middle, too frightened to die, too shattered to truly live. Servants whispered that 6 suicides had happened. Everyone knew the real number was much higher. Most deaths simply disappeared into palace silence. For many, death suddenly felt kinder than survival. Some cut their wrists with sharp pottery. Some tore silk into ropes. Some stepped off high balconies, letting gravity give them the mercy the emperor never would. Caligula still wasn't finished. Believing himself a god, he invented a new cruelty. He allowed parents to visit, not to help them, but to watch their daughters suffer. The girls were dressed in fine clothes and painted to hide bruises. They were forced to smile and lie. Mothers and fathers sat there shaking, pretending everything was a celebration. If a parent's voice broke, they were killed. If a girl let her mask slip, her whole family paid the price. Everyone played a role in a nightmare theater while Caligula watched, satisfied. But Caligula pushed even further. Destroying girls was not enough. He wanted to humiliate the very men who protected Rome. He forced senators to watch their own wives be shamed. He mocked high-ranking officers of the Praetorian Guard, stripping them of dignity in front of their soldiers. He made seasoned warriors repeat obscene passwords just to embarrass them. Among these men was Cassius Charia, once loyal, once proud. A veteran who had served Germanicus with honor, Caligula treated Charia with constant cruelty. He turned him into an object of jokes. He believed no blade would dare rise against him. He believed fear alone would keep everyone trapped. But he misjudged the breaking point of the men he mocked. Their anger stopped being political. It became survival. The emperor was no longer a leader. He was a disease eating the empire from the inside. On January 24th, 41 AD, everything snapped. During the Palatine Games, Caligula left the celebration through a private underground hallway, the Cryptoporticus, planning to take a bath. He walked into the dim stone passage believing he was untouchable. He would not walk out. Charia and the conspirators blocked his path. There were no speeches, no warnings, only steel. The first strike sliced his throat, crushing the voice he once demanded Rome worship. His scream drowned in his own blood. More blades followed. More than 30 wounds tore through him. The self-proclaimed god of Rome died like any frightened man begging, bleeding, collapsing in the dirt. But the nightmare didn't end with him. Just a short distance away, trapped inside the Garden of Venus, the young women heard the chaos boots slamming the floor. Metal clashing, shouts tearing through the halls. They curled up in corners, shaking, unsure if this was rescue or another form of terror. Then came silence. Not the heavy silence they knew, but a strange, empty silence. A silence without the monster. Yet they didn't move. They had learned one thing clearly. When something ends in Rome, something worse often begins. Caligula's death did not bring peace. It opened a new storm. His Germanic bodyguards, discovering their emperor dead, exploded in blind rage. The palace turned into a slaughterhouse within minutes. They cut down servants, officials, anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. For the girls in the Garden of Venus, the walls that once trapped them now felt like a place of execution. Some ran barefoot through corridors covered with broken pottery and bodies. Others hid in their rooms, frozen by years of conditioning, waiting to see whether the next person who touched the door would kill them or free them. Hours later, when the chaos finally faded, a trembling figure was dragged out from behind a curtain. Claudius, Caligula's uncle. The soldiers placed the imperial mantle on him, making him emperor. Claudius understood immediately that a truth this dark could destroy the entire empire. If Rome learned what had happened inside the Garden of Venus, the shame of noble families, senators, generals, and the palace itself became public, everything could collapse. So he made a choice colder than silence. The survivors of the garden were not given justice. They were given payments. The palace returned the girls to their families dressed in gold, wrapped in fine fabrics, carrying dowries large enough to force silence. Every coin carried the same message. Forget. Forget the nights of terror. Forget the crimes. Forget the daughters Rome fed to a false god. No trials were held. No guilty men were punished. Rome hid the truth under layers of official lies. The girls went home. But the people who returned were not the ones who left. They were shadows wearing human shapes. In Roman society, a woman's worth lived in her purity. And even though these girls were victims, the stain followed them like a curse. Most never married. Most never healed. Families locked them in quiet rooms at the edge of their estates, ashamed of them instead of the monster who harmed them. Servants left food at their doors, avoiding their eyes. Their trauma unfolded the same way for all of them. A touch on the shoulder sent them into panic. A loud sound made them collapse. Night after night they woke screaming. The physical prison was gone, but the prison inside their minds had no walls to break, no guards to fight, no emperor to kill. Freedom became another kind of punishment. Rome ignored them. Blaming women was easier than blaming the empire's own rot. Because the truth of Caligula's reign wasn't just about one cruel ruler. It was about a system that concentrated all power into one man with no limits and no checks. A system that allowed the Garden of Venus to exist. Later historians debated details. Whether some writers exaggerated, whether rivals painted him darker than he was. But the overlap of sources points to one clear fact. A machine of abuse existed, and Rome let it function. Caligula proved how thin the line is between civilization and cruelty, between order and chaos, and that line was carved into the bodies of forgotten girls. Rome built wonders that lasted thousands of years, but it failed its most basic duty to protect the innocent from the powerful. Their story is more than history. It is a warning. A nation can rise to greatness, but if it sacrifices human dignity to do so, its legacy will not be glory. It will be shame. The letters burned, the names erased, the tears dried into silk, those shadows remain. They survived the fire Rome tried to bury them under. Now they belong to us. We must choose whether to look at them or repeat them, because evil doesn't always show itself with armies or flames. Sometimes evil wears a crown. Sometimes it hides behind silence. And sometimes it wins simply because no one speaks. If this story disturbed you, let it. If it angered you, let it. And if it made you think about the cost of unchecked power, then the voices Rome tried to erase have finally been heard.